that the Am Haaretz is excludes someone who would be the Kohen Mashiach, or the limud continues, May Am Haaretz Prat Lenasi. So we say that those words, May Am Haaretz, from among the Am Haaretz, excludes the Kohen Mashiach and also excludes the Nasi, who we know is the king. So the Gemara asks as follows: Mahalak Kvar Yatsu Mashiach Lidon Bepar and Nasi Lidon Besayir. So the Gemara asks, what did you need to tell me a limud for? Obviously, I know that a Kohen Mashiach and a Nasi are excluded from the regular din of a Chatas because they have their own carbon. That a Kohen Mashiach has the carbon of the par that he brings, his bull, and the Nasi brings his sayir. So you know that they're excluded. Why do you need a special limud to tell you? So the Gemara answers, Sheyachol, because I might have thought Mashiach, that the Kohen Mashiach al halam davar im shigigos maisim maybe par. So I would have thought, okay, that's fine. He has his own special carbon, but so therefore, when the special carbon applies, it applies. But al shigigos maisa lechude maybe kizbo sira. But I might have thought that when so we know that the par that the Kohen Mashiach brings is only when he makes a mistake in his judgment, that it's im shigigos. So it's shigigos maisa. That with something that's that he makes a mistake in his calculation. So we say, okay, when that applies, it applies. But when it doesn't apply, and all he did was he didn't make a mistake in his calculation, but he simply did something unintentional, like for example, ate by accident a piece of chaylev. So you might say, so where a special carbon applies, it applies, and where it doesn't, the regular carbon applies. So Talmud Lomar, therefore it says, Me'am Haaretz, the pasuk says Me'am Haaretz Prat L'Mashiach, Me'am Haaretz Prat L'Nasi, that the words Me'am Haaretz excludes the Mashiach and it excludes the Nasi, to tell you that the regular carbon never applies. Even when the special carbon does not apply, they're not in the regular category of someone who brings a chatas. Now you'll notice that the Gemara says the answer having to do with the answer having to do with the regular with the Mashiach, but it doesn't. It then throws in the part about the Nasi at the end. So it references both the Mashiach and the Nasi. So the Gemara says, Tenach Mashiach. Okay, so that makes sense what you're telling me about the Kohen Mashiach, because in fact, as you pointed out, he has a special carbon that applies when it applies, and when there's no special carbon, then he has nothing. But El Nasi b'shigagas ma'isa hu d'maisi. But that's not a good answer for Nasi, because in fact, in other words, the Nasi, it does apply when his special carbon doesn't apply. So say, okay, we know he has a special carbon regularly, and he does not have a special carbon, and he still is relevant. It's just continue to say that it's because he is chayav a carbon on shigigas maisa, that you should say. So therefore, in other words, your answer doesn't apply. The answer you gave by Mashiach does not work by a Nasi, because there's no distinction between shigigas maisa and shigigas maisa and helam davar. In both cases, he's chayav, and therefore the limud Me'am Haaretz would come to tell you that his special carbon applies and the regular carbon does not apply. So Amr Zvid Mishmei the Rava Hachu b'Mayaskina. So I'll give you the case that you need to learn, that you need a pasuk to tell you that Nasi is not relevant to the regular carbon of a regular chatas, and only his special carbon. Kegon, what's the case? Sha'aho kazayas chelev keshu hedyot, that he ate a kazayas of chelev, which has a chi of kares when he was a regular person. V'nismana, and then he was appointed to become the king. V'achakach nodolo, and afterwards it became known to him that he ate something that was chelev, and therefore he might be chayiv. So I might have thought naisi kizbo sira. I might have thought that he should bring the carbon that a regular person would bring, who's not a king. Kamash Malan. Therefore, it comes to tell us that Me'am Haaretz, that the Nasi would not bring the kizbo sira of a regular thing, even though he did the avera when he was a regular person, because of the language of the pasuk Me'am Haaretz. Now that case should sound familiar because we dealt with it previously, and the Gemara is going to say, in fact, Hani Chalurib Shimon Dazal Basar Yediyah. So he says, okay, that answer is a good answer according to Reb Shimon, who says that generally we go after when he knows about it, meaning that the knowledge and the action should happen while he's in the same category. And here it happens in separate categories, so you have to exclude it. El Rabbanan, but according to Rabbanan, the Azli Basar Chata, but according to the Rabbanan, who we learned that they look at solely the question of what status was he in when he did the Avera. And since in this case he was in the status of a regular person when he did the Avera, you would think that he should be chai, that they would say he would be chai of the carbon. So therefore, what case? So what case are you coming to exclude? Because in fact, according to the Rabbanon, he would bring that carbon. So we say, okay, the nasi, when he has a special carbon, he brings it. But in instances when it doesn't apply, for example, where he found out where he did the avera when he was a regular person, you would say he still brings it according to the Rabbanan. So what's the chiddush of a me'am aretz that's coming to exclude him? So rather, what's the case where nasi is excluded? Elam razvid mishmei derabba hachva mayaskina. And here's why we need the pasuk me'am aretz to exclude the nasi. Kigon sha'acho chatzi kazayas chelev kishu hedyet, that he ate only half a kazayas of chelev when he was a hedyet. Now, obviously, for a half a kazayas, that's not yet the shear that he is chayav kares. V'nismana, and he becomes appointed king. V'shlimo, and he finishes eating the chelev. So he was having his steak or whatever it was. They told him, you became king. He says, very nice, and then he just kept on eating. So he ate chatzi kazayas before he was a king. He ate chatzi kazayas after he was a king. V'achar kach nodalo. I'm sorry, and afterwards he was informed to say that you ate collectively a full kazayas of chelev, half when you were a regular person and half when you were a king. So I might have thought, mitzdarev v'naisi kizbo sira. I might have thought that, look, at the end of the day, take a look at the chatzi kazayas that he ate. Look at the two chatzi kazasim, the one before he became king and one after he became king, and say that he should have to bring a regular carbon. And so you might think that he should be chayav in that case. Kamash Milan comes the pasuk to tell you, my amaretz, that a nasi is excluded. So it's coming to, that is, the Gemara concludes, the reason why it needed the pasuk my amaretz to exclude a nasi is to tell you that these aren't, that you might think that they should come together in order to mechayev him a regular carbon. Kamash Milan, it doesn't. Rashi points out, once you're saying half and half, why not say that, and the Gemara says that we think that maybe the second half should come to include that he brings a regular carbon. Maybe the first half should contribute toward him bringing the special carbon. So Rashi says no, because the pasuk that we're talking about, Me'am Haaretz, is written by the case of a regular carbon. So that's what we would have thought, and therefore the pasuk comes to say Me'am Haaretz. So that's the conclusion. The reason the reason the Kohen Mashiach has to be excluded is because you might have thought that when a special carbon applies, it applies, but when it doesn't, he should bring a kizbo seira. Answers the Gemara, no, me'am aretz, that when his regular carbon doesn't apply, he's not in the category of, when his special carbon doesn't apply, he's not in the category of a regular person, he doesn't bring. And in the case of a nasi, it's coming for a much more specific case where you had chatzi chelev, but when he was a hedyot, and chatzi chelev when he was a nasi, and it comes to tell you that those do not combine, and therefore the pasuk me'amar, it excludes him from the category of a kizba and sira, and he would not bring any carbon in that case. Okay, boy minei Rav Meir Rav Nachman. So this is a kind of a continuation of the case we just outlined. That he asked him. Rav asked Rav Nachman the following question: Siyos mahu shetafsik. Would his becoming a king interrupt? So Heichi Dami, the Gemara says, what's the case? This guy's even worse. The first guy we said he didn't eat, he just continued eating after he became king. But this guy, he was eating a chatzi kazayis of chelev kishu hedyet when he's a regular person. V'nismana, and they told him, "Oh, you became king." V'avar, and then he abdicated the throne. He said, "Forget it, I'm not king." V'shlimo, and then he just went on eating. And all this happens, obviously, toch kedei pras, achidas pras. So he's all this is, however, it's not a very long shir. So he had a quick day. He was a regular person. He became king. He gave up the kingship, and then he finished eating the second half of the chelev. So the question is, so the Gemara says, Hasam hu d'lo mitzdaref the achli pagu kishu hedyot pagu kishu nasi. So maybe you say we just finished saying that when he ate half a kazayas when he was a hedyot, and then he ate half a kazayas when he was a king, that those do not combine. So you might say, in those cases, it doesn't combine. So he says, but maybe you'll say here, so what happened there? That half of the kazayas was eaten when he was a regular person, half the kazayas was eaten when he was a king. Those are really two different people. That's how Rashi learns that it's like there. It's as if it's a different person. So you would say in that case they don't combine. But here at the end of the day, because he ate the second kazayas after he already ceased to be the king, so you would say when he ate the first half of kazayas he was a regular person, and when he ate the second half of the kazayas he was a regular person. So therefore those should really combine. That's one side. Odilmor maybe lo shna. It makes no difference. At the end of the day, his becoming a nasi makes him into a new person. So therefore, he was a regular person. A nasi made him into a different person. Now he switched back to become a regular person. But at the end of the day, he's a new regular person, and those would not be mitzdarif. So what would be the halacha in that case? So the Gemara says, Tifshat lemeha da amar ula amar Rav Yochanan. So maybe you can learn the answer to that question from this that Ula said in the name of Rav Yochanan. As follows: Acho chelev. So you had a guy who ate chelev. Chelev, he ate it by accident, and when you eat chelev, if someone eats chelev by accident, the hefresh carbon, they're supposed to bring a carbon chatas. And what happened? Vahamir, he decided that he was going to become a mummer. He's no longer interested in keeping the halachas of the Torah. We'll discuss a little bit further on what does that mean. So he decides that he's no longer Jewish, or he doesn't want to be bound by the laws of a Jew. And the halacha is that someone who's a mummer is not able to bring a carbon. In other words, we would not accept a carbon from a mummer. We'll learn more about this. But what happened? So he did a mistake. He felt bad. He was mafresh a carbon. Then he decided, you know what, I'm not interested in this whole thing. And then v'chazar bo, he did tshuva, and he decided that he wanted to bring the carbon. So we say, that since there was a period of time that he was a mummer, and a mummer is not relevant to a carbon, so therefore it invokes the rule of dichoy. The rule of dichoy is the idea that if there's some period that the carbon becomes inapplicable, then it is permanently inapplicable, and he cannot use that carbon that he separated. So therefore, what would be the comparison to here? We're saying that when someone's in a category of the carbon, they cannot bring the carbon, that when you come back to your original status, it's already pushed off, and you can no longer do it. So therefore, in our case, we talked about he ate half a kazayas when he was a regular person. Then he became a nasi. Then he was no longer the nasi, and we're trying to say that those should be mitzdaref. That's what we said. And the Gemara is now supposing that just like someone who becomes a mummer, and once he becomes inapplicable to the carbon, then even though before, in other words, he made a mistake, he wanted to bring a carbon. Then he became a mummer, he didn't. Then he went back to wanting to bring the carbon. So same thing, that he was a regular person, he had an interruption of being a nasi, but now he's a regular person again, and he wants those to be mitzdaref. And we see from the case of mummer that it does not work. And since once he was that status in between, it's pushed off. So too here, since he was the nasi in the middle, even though both his eatings, the half of kazayas was before he became a nasi and the other half afterwards, we say that it's pushed off. So the Gemara says, so therefore we want to say that's how we would learn the answer to this question. So the Gemara says, Hachi Ashta, what kind of comparison is that? That's not a good comparison, and we cannot learn from the case of mummer. Why? Because mummer la barasiyah carbonhu. A mummer is in a category where he cannot bring any carbon. So therefore he's entirely removed from the whole parsha, the whole category of bringing a carbon, a mummer. But hi, barasiyah carbonhu. But this guy, you have the person, he was a regular person, then he was a nasi, then he was a regular person again. At every stage in that category, he is someone who is relevant to the halachas of carbon. Now it is true that his status as carbon changed, because originally he would be a kizba v'seira, then he goes to the sa'ir while he's a nasi, and then he goes back to the kizba and seira, but throughout that process, he was someone who was relevant to the halachas of carbon. So therefore, you cannot compare the case of mummer and the case of someone who became a nasi and then was over from the nasios. So the Gemara leaves off without answering that question. Okay, boy minei Reb Zera min Reb Sheshes. So Reb Zera asked Reb Sheshes, and again, building on the scenarios that we're building here, he asked him the following question. Achol safek chelev kashu hedyet. So he ate something that he thought was regular meat that he's allowed to eat, and it turns out that this meat had become mixed up, and it was unclear as to whether whether it was chelev or it was shuman, whether it was something that he's chayav kares or it was something permitted. So, what would be the ordinary case when someone eats something that they don't know whether it was a chayav kares? He would bring an asham. He would bring an asham taloi, right? So in this case, he ate something such that it would ordinarily be mechayev and asham taloi, but before he finds out that this was safek chelev and nismane, he became appointed king. V'nodalo al sveiko, and then he gets told, by the way, that meat you ate when you were a regular person before you were appointed king, we're not sure. Maybe it was chelev, maybe it was shuman. So mahu, what's the halacha? So we say. So according to the Rabbanon, who say that the critical question is, what status was he at the time he did the chet, and that's what determines the carbon. So then it's easy. You say, look, he was at the time he ate the meat, he became mechayev in asham taloi, and therefore he's going to be mechayev in asham taloi. We don't care that he became appointed king afterwards. The ma'isi asham taloi elakiti ba'ilach. But when do I ask you the question? Aliba the Reb Shimon. I ask you according to Reb Shimon, because here are the two sides. You say me deshtani levada yeshtani lesafik. So on the one hand, you could say, look, a chatas and an asham taloi are two sides of the same coin. A chatas is if you know for sure, and asham taloi is if you don't know for sure, and it's a safek. And since we know that when he becomes a king and he's changed from being a regular person to being a king, that he can he's no longer in the category of bringing a chatas. So just like he's no longer in the category of bringing the chatas, he's no longer in the category of bringing the asham taloi. Those are basically the same things. Odelmor, or what would be the argument to say that the case of asham taloi, because again, remember, we dealt with things before and after he's appointed already, but why would asham taloi be different? Ki ishtani levadai, di ishtani carbon didei. Aval hacha d'lo ishtani carbon didei, ema laisi asham taloi. He says that when do we say that he's a changed person, and that he can no longer, in other words, his change in status says he can no longer bring a carbon? Maybe that's only by a regular chatas, because what happens that in as relates to halachas of regular chatas, at first when he's a regular person, he's in the category of having to bring a kizbo seira, and then when he becomes the king, he's now relevant to bringing a sayer. So not only did his status change, but his carbon changed. But But we know that the halacha of an asham taloi is still relevant to a nasi even after he becomes a nasi. In other words, that carbon does not switch. So granted, his status changed from being a regular person to becoming a king, but unlike a chatas where his carbon changes from a kizbo sira to a sa'ir, in this case, he was bringing an ayal before when he was a regular person, and he's bringing an ayal when he is the nasi. So therefore, maybe I would say that he should still bring the asham taloi. And so, is an asham taloi different than a regular chatas? The Gemara leaves off teku. Okay, last thin line. Taner Rabbanan. So we learned before the words me amaretz, from the amaretz. Prat lumum. We learned before that it excludes a kohen mashiach and that it excludes a nasi, a king. But now we're saying those same words. Me amaretz, prat lumummer, comes to exclude a mummer, that a mummer is not in the category of someone who can bring a carbon. Rav Shimon, Rav Yossi, Rav Shimon, Rav Shimon, Rav Yossi learns the same halacha that a mummer is excluded, but he learns it from a different pasuk. We actually, you might remember, we learned this daf beis, I think, at the beginning of Horayos. So the pasuk says, "Asher lo se'asena bishgaga va'ashem," that he says that which should not be done, he did the avera bishgaga by accident va'ashem, and he's guilty. So their emphasis is on the element that it was a mistake here. The Rashi in Chulin, which is the main sugya here of Chulin Dafei, it explains a little more fully the words Asher lo se'asena, that it should not be done. So normally we read it that way, that he did an action that shouldn't be done. The way Rashi learns that Asher lo se'asena is that which he does not do, meaning that when is it relevant to for him to bring a carbon chatas is when he does an action that would be chayav kares if it was b'mezid, and it's an action that he's not ordinarily in the habit of doing, i.e., he's a regular person. He's not a mummer. He's not someone who regularly does this avera. But in other words, that if he's someone who regularly does this avera, and you can't say that this is a departure from ordinary practice, we would say that the halachas of achatas don't apply to him. So that's the second limud. So therefore we say hashav biyadiyasa maybe carbon hashagaso, lo shav biyadiyasa eno maybe carbon hashagaso. So he says, so therefore, someone, if you would tell him when he would find out that he did something wrong, he would say, if you would tell him before he's doing it, you know that that's wrong what you're about to do. That's a piece of chaylev. If he would stop and not eat it, so that's the kind of person who can become a chayav of carbon chatas. But if he's the kind of guy who would say, nah, I'll eat it anyway, and it just so happens to be that this particular time he might not have. So in that case, we say, sorry, you can't bring a carbon chatas because at the end of the day you are a mummer. Okay, so one limud is from Me'am Haaretz and the other is from Asher Lo Se'asena. So we have two limudim, each telling us that a mummer is not eligible to bring a carbon. So the Gemara asks, second wide line, my benaya, what's the difference between these two views? Amar Rav Hamnuna says, mummer lechol chelev, or maybe carbon al adam iked benayu. That the distinction between where you learn out these psukim would be relevant in the case of someone who is a mummer to eat chelev, meaning that he eats chelev. That's he likes chelev, and that he doesn't keep the Torah, but he doesn't eat dam. So what happens if he eats dam by accident in a case where someone would normally become mechuyev achatas? So that's the case. That's between them. Mar Savar, the Tanakama holds kiman the momer lechol chelev ledam nami momer have, that he says that since he's a mummer, he's someone who rejects the Torah as relates to chelev, so therefore he rejects it as relates to dam, even though, and then the fact that he doesn't eat dam is not because he's not a mummer, it's because maybe he doesn't like dam. But at the end of the day, this is a person who does not keep the Torah, and therefore, according to the Tanakama, we would not accept a carbon from him on a chatas for eating dam. And the other, the Rav Shimon Rav Yossi, who says the name of Rav Shimon, he says, no, at the end of the day, this guy is a mummer as relates to chelev, and therefore he can't bring a chatas for chelev, but he's not a mummer as relates to dam. Dam is something that he avoids, and therefore we would not consider him a mummer, and we would accept his carbon. So Gemara asks, Rava Amar. Rava says, the kuli amal mummer lechol chelev lo avim mummer ladam. Everyone says that someone who is a mummer to eat chelev is not a mummer to eat dam. So you just said that that's the case we're talking about. But according to Rava, everyone, even the Tanakama, agrees that the mummer status does not carry over. Just to clarify, what was the Havamina here? So in other words, generally speaking, both of these opinions would hold that a mummer for one avera is not a mummer l'kol Torah kula. Someone's a mummer for that particular thing. There's a mummer in that. So why would I think it was different? The reason is because chelev and dam are brought in the same pasuk. Kol chelev v'chol dam lo sochelu. So you might have thought that those are linked in some fashion, and then therefore they were arguing about this particular case. Do we say they're linked? So according to the Tanakama, they are. And if he's a mummer l'chelev, he's a mummer adam. And Rav Shimon Rav Yossi was saying, no, they're not linked, even though they're in the same pasuk. That was the Havamina. But then the Gemara says from Rava that Rava is of the opinion that everyone holds that a mummer l'chelev is not a mummer l'dam. So therefore, what's the case? That's the distinction between these two limudim, between the Tanakama and Rav Yossi, Rav Shimon Rav Yossi. The Gemara says, Elahacha ba'ochen nevela l'teyavon v'neschalef lo b'shuman v'achlu kamifagi. They're arguing about the following case. You had a guy here who was a mummer l'teyavon. So what is that? There's two kinds of mummers. You have a mummer l'teyavon and a mummer l'hachas. A mummer l'teyavon is someone he's a Baal Taiva. He wants to eat. He likes whatever. Some filet mignon or something that he likes, and therefore he's going to go and eat it because he has that taiva. But he's not doing it because he's trying to start up with the Rebbeinu Shalom. He just has a taiva that he's pursuing. Versus a mummer lahachis is someone who eats it because they're trying to make a point to the Rebbeinu Shalom, say, your Torah says not to eat it, I'm going to eat it. How do you generally tell the difference between a mummer l'te'avon and a mummer lahachis? Is as follows. A mummer l'te'avon is the kind of guy who says, look, I like to eat, this kind of meat. If there's kosher meat, I'll eat kosher. But if there's no kosher, I'm going to eat the non-kosher meat. So that's a guy who be'etzem tries to keep the Torah. It's just that his taiva gets in the way and he's going to eat it. But a mummer lahachis is a guy who says, I see the kosher piece of meat here, but I'd rather eat the treif meat. So that's the guy who's a mummer lahachis. So in any event, what we're talking about here is you have a guy who's a ochem available l'te'ava, means that when there's kosher meat, he eats kosher meat. But when there's treif meat, he'll eat treif meat too. But what happens in this case? He thought what he was eating was a piece of kosher meat, and it turns out that in fact it was a chaylev. So ordinarily, when someone thinks they're eating a piece of kosher meat and it turns out that it was chaylev, that they bring a carbon chatas. But in this case, the question is, since he's the kind of guy who, if the kosher meat wasn't there, would eat treif meat, do you say that he's a mummer and therefore he can't bring the carbon even when he makes a mistake? So Mar Savar, the Tanakama holds, Kivan del Te'avan Acho Bebezid Mummerhu. The Tanakama holds that, look, at the end of the day, this guy is a mummer as relates to chaylev, because all the time he eats chaylev whenever there's no kosher meat available. So therefore he's a mummer, and we do not accept as a carbon. Mar Savar, Rav Yossi Reb Shimon holds Kivan the Ilu Eshkach at the Tera Lo Achad Surah, that since if he could find kosher meat, he would eat it, and he would not eat the Isura, la mummerhu. So therefore, he's not necessarily a mummer. And when he thinks he's eating kosher meat, and it turns out that it's not kosher, he should be able to bring a chatas, because at the end of the day, he's not a mummer in the category of nevela that would apply in this case. Okay, so that's the distinction between the two limudim, whether we learn it out from Me'am Aretz or from Asher Lo Se'asena. The distinction, that's the case that distinguishes them. Okay, Tana Rabbanan, 6 lines down of the wide lines. Acho chaylev, someone who eats chaylev, zehu mummer. This is a mummer. Ve'ezehu mummer. The Gemara is going to ask, this doesn't make sense, but the Brisa contains ve'ezehu mummer. Who's a mummer? Ochem velos, v'treifos, shkasim, ramashim, esasha yain nesach. Someone who eats nevela, which is animal that died, that did not have proper shchita, treifas that had one of the problems that makes an animal a treifa that you can't eat even if it's checked properly. Shkatzim or muslim are creepy crawly things, or he drank yain nesach. So we say that's a mumar. And Rabbi Yehuda says af alovesh klayim, even someone who wears klayim. Okay, so that's the brisa. Now we're going to analyze it. Amar ma achol chaylev. The brisa starts by saying someone who eats chaylev zehu mumar. That's a mumar. The brisa then continues says veizehu mumar. So the Gemara is going to ask, we just said what a mummer was. It's someone who eats chaylev. And now you're saying, what's a mummer? Ochem nevelos, treifos, shkatzim, or mashim. So my Kamar, what's the Brisa saying? It asks what's a mummer. It says here's what's a mummer. Then it says what's a mummer and gives a different answer. So Amar Rabba bar Rav Chana, Amar Rav Yochanan, Hachi Kamar. This is what it's saying. Acho chaylev l'teyavon. So he says the first part, the Acho chaylev, that's a mummer, and then when it says who's a mummer, that's all part of one opinion of Tanakama. It says follows: Acho chaylev l'teyavon harei ze mummer. If someone eats chaylev because whenever he doesn't find kosher meat, that's a mummer. Lahachis, if someone eats lahachis harei ze stuki. This is a stuki. Now you see that some of the Gersos learn that if you look in Masar Sashas, learn that it's a min. A min is someone who's like a heretic. But in any event, what we're dealing with, as Rashi points out, is we're dealing with someone who is chashud on avodah zarah. And there's a difference. There's a number of distinctions between someone who's a mummer versus a tzeduki. For example, what happens if they write a sefer Torah, whether you have to burn it or not? What happens if they shecht an animal, whether under any circumstances the shechita of a mummer could be valid, but the shechita of a tzduki or a min would not be valid. So we're saying that someone is a mummer l'te'avon, that when there's kosher meat he eats it, but when there's treif meat he'll eat it if there's no kosher meat. that is a mummer. Someone who eats treif meat, even when there's kosher meat, he's a tzduki or a min. Vezehu mummer the bestama tzduki. So and the Brisa continuing says, who's the kind of mummer that you can assume that he is a tzduki? Havi Omer, you could say that's ochel nevelo treifa shkatzim ramashim esasa yain nasach. So the Brisa is clarifying itself. So it was saying a mummer l'te'avon is an ochel nevelo l'te'avon is a mummer. Someone who is an ochel nevelo l'hachis is a tzduki, and who is someone you can assume he's a tzduki? Someone who eats treifas and avelas, shkatzim ramashim yain nasach. That those are things that are disgusting. So. Shkatzim and Ramashim, it's obviously why they're disgusting. Tosas and Avodah Zarah discusses that the case of Nevelos and Treifos, we have to be talking about not where someone killed an animal nicely and didn't shecht it, because that a person would eat is not disgusting. We must be talking about an animal that got sick, and no one wants to eat an animal that got sick and withered away and died. That is disgusting, and a treifa could be an animal that got one of these defects, like maybe his neck got broken, and it took a slow death. No one wants to eat it. The Mefarshim also discuss why is yayin nesach disgusting. Could be because simply understood is because you want to stay far away from Avodah Zarah. So in any event, if someone eats these things, let's just take the example of eating bugs. So clearly. That he's not doing it for his desire. He's doing it because he's a mummer lahachis, and if he's a mummer lahachis, that makes him a tzduki. So that whole category of the first part where it says ocha chelev zeh mummer, someone eats a chelev is a mummer, and then it's bringing an example of who is the one who's a tzduki. That's where it brings the shkatzim or ramashim. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda Amar afa lovish klayim, even someone who wears klayim. Someone who wears shatnez clothing. So the Gemara asks, "My benayu, what's the difference between them?" So ikabenayu kloyim derabanan. So he says as follows: the Gemara's kasha is, as Rashi explains, kloyim is a deraisa, treifa is a deraisa. So what's the difference? What's the difference between the Tanakama who says that he eats chaylev l'te'avon or he wears kloyim? So the Gemara says ikabenayu kloyim derabanan. That the shatnez derabanan, there's certain kinds of things that are shatnez midaraisa, and others that are only midarabanan. So Mar Savar midaraisa have a mummer, derabanan lo have a mummer. So one opinion would hold that if you do something that's an issa deraisa like chaylev, that's when you're a mummer. But if you do something derabanan, you're not a mummer. That would be the Tanakama. Mar Savar and Rabbi Yehuda is coming to tell you the case of klayim. But klayim given them a farsim isurei afilu derabanan have a mummer. And he's coming to say, even if it's only a derabanan. For example, there are cases of shatnez that is well known that it is asur midrabanan, so we'll say that makes someone into a mummer. Presumably, you can infer that if it's not as well known, that would not necessarily make him a mummer. Okay, please. So that's the distinction between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda. Pligi b'Rav Acher Ravina, Chad Amar l'Teyavon mummer lahaches tzduki. So Rav Acher Ravina had the machlokas. Excuse me. One says that if someone does something l'teyavon because he has a taiva, that makes him a mummer. If he does a lahaches, meaning that he could have kosher meat and he chooses to eat non-kosher meat, that's a tzduki. That's what we learned before according to Rabbi Yochanan. The Chadam and the other is of the opinion lahaches nami mummer. Even someone who is ochon avelos lahaches, he does something to kind of get back at the Rebbeinu Shalom. He is still just a mummer. He's not a tzduki. Tzduki. What does it take to be considered in the category of a tzduki or a min? Kola oved avodas kochavim. Someone who actually serves avodah zarah. So we have a distinction about mummer lahaches. That is someone who's an ochel lahaches. He eats the vela lahaches. Is he a mummer like the first view, or is he a tzduki like the first view, or is he only a mummer like the second view? And in order to become a tzduki, he would need to do avodah zarah. That's machlokes. So Meisha, the Gemara asks on the view, that someone who does a lahaches is a tzduki as follows. Sorry. He says, "Acho parash echad or yitush echad." If someone ate a flea or a gnat, these little flying things, or yitush echad, He's a mummer. Now the Gemara asked, so we're arguing about whether a lahachas person is a mummer or a tzeduki. He says someone who eats a gnat is obviously a lahachas nek. Why? Because no one has a taiva to eat a gnat. So therefore, it must be that he's a mummer. It must be that he's a lahachas, and yet the Brisa tells us that he's a mummer, not a tzeduki. So this is a kasha on the first view, which says that someone who's lahachas is a tzeduki and not a mummer. So the Gemara says, no, people could have a taiva for a gnat. Why? Hasam the Amar etam tam the isura. That the guy, it's true that he wants, and this is an interesting chiddush. He does want to do something that's the keneged the Torah, but that doesn't necessarily, at the end of the day, he's still doing it because he has a taiva. In other words, it's the fruits of the forbidden tree. He says, oh, I'm not allowed to eat the gnat, so I really have a taiva to try out Isser to do something wrong. But he's not trying to start up with the Rabbanu Shalom. He just has a taiva for something that's forbidden. So granted, he doesn't get pleasure from it because it's not fun to eat a gnat, but he's kind of thinking to himself, look, I'm not allowed to eat it. I want to try it. But the Rabbanu Shalom is not part of the cheshbon. He's not trying to get back at the Rabbanu Shalom or saying I reject you. He's just saying I have a taiva for a gnat. I have a taiva to do something that's in Isser. All right, so we leave off with that machlokas. Okay, Vezo Nasi Zem Melech. So the Mishnah went out and explained that a Nasi is a reference to the king. Here's what we're going to learn where. How you learn that. Atan Rabban Nasi. When it says Nasi brings a carbon, that he brings a Sa'ir rather than a Siro Kizba. Yachal Nasi Sheva Kenachshem Ben Aminadav. Maybe a Nasi means a prince, like we had to see him in the time of the Mishkan, like Nachshon Ben Aminadav. So I might think that's what it means when it talks about a Nasi, because it says the Nasi brings a special carbon, but it doesn't explain who a Nasi is. Talmud Lomar, therefore it says Mikol Mitzvahs Hashem Elokav, that the pasuk that's written in Vayikra, where it talks in Vayikra Daled, where it talks about the Nasi bringing a special carbon, says that it says Asher Nasi Yechta, that the Nasi sins. So Asa Achaz Mikol Mitzvahs Hashem Elokav, and he does one of the mitzvahs of Hashem, his God, Asher Lo Se'asena, that should not be done, right? Ulahalan Hu Amar, and later in the Parsha of Malchus, where it talks about Som Tasim Alecha Melech, that you should appoint a king, it says Leman Yilmod Liyiras Hashem Elokav, that it talks about that he should have, the pasuk says that he should have the Sefer Torah with him. Ha'isa Imo should be with him, and Karabal Kol Yimei Chayav, and he should read in that Sefer Torah all the days of his life, Leman Yilmod Liyiras Hashem Elokav, so that he'll learn to fear Hashem, his God. So you see this language of Hashem Elokav, both by the Nasi, carbon Nasi, and Ranama Beis, and by a king. So just like in the case of a Melech, we're talking about someone who has above him only Hashem is God, but he has no human being above him. Af Nasi, so too Nasi, which uses that same language of Hashem Elokav when he brings a special carbon of his Sa'ir, Sheina Gabav El Hashem Elokav. It's someone who only has Hashem is God above him. Okay. Rabbi asked Rabbi Chia, he was talking to him, he says, Kigonani, Mahu Besahir. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rabbi, he asked Rabbi Chia, he says, let me ask you a question. At the end of the day, I'm a Nasi. There's, that maybe if the Beis Hamikdash was standing today, if I made a calculation, a mistake, that I should have to bring the carbon Sa'ir as a Nasi because I'm a Nasi. Amarle, Rabbi Chia answered him, Harei Tzarascha beBavel. Your competitor is in Bavel. Tzara, we know, like, for example, is the language we use when someone has two wives. The wives are tzaras to each other. So he says, your tzara is in Bavel, meaning the Reish Galusa. And so he says the Reish Galusa is in Bavel, who's above you. But he just says, Tzarascha, your competitor, as if they're on the same level. So Rabbi says back to him, Eisvei. So the way Rabbi understood it is he's saying, there's two of you. And if there's two kings, neither one could bring a carbon. So he says, but that's not true. We have a brisa that says that at the point that there was kings of the 10 Shratim and there were kings, there were Malchus based David, that you see when there were two Jewish kings, they would each bring a carbon of a Nasi, even though there were two kings. So he said, what difference does it make if there's the Reish Galusa and me are both around, but we're both Nasiim? Let us both bring a carbon. Amalei, Hasam like Kaifi Adadi. He says that neither of them were subject to each other. When they had Malchei Yisrael and Malchei Beis David, they were independent. One was not on top of the other, and therefore they could both bring a carbon. But we are subject to the Reish Galusa. So basically, Reb Chia was saying back to Rebbe, sorry, there's someone above you because the Reish Galusa is above you. Rav Safra Masni Hachi. Rav Safra learned the discussion was a little different. What would be the halacha? My nasi who would have to bring a carbon sayer? Amalei Hasam Shevet Hacha Mechokek. He says there in Bavel they're considered a shevet. The shevet is a stick, and Hacha. But here in Eretz Yisrael we're considered a mechokek. A mechokek is a chok, is a law. Someone who makes laws. V'tanya, and we learned in the Brisa, Lo Yasser Shevet mi Yehuda, Zer Reish Goylo shebeBavel, that when it says that the pasuk says that the shevet should not be removed, the stick should not be removed from the shevet of Yehuda. That's a reference to the Rosh Golem Bavel Sherodes Yisrael b'Makel, who rules Klal Yisrael by force with a stick. Mechokek mi bein ragla. Pasuk continued, and the person who makes the laws from among his legs, meaning from his progeny, that there will always be machokeks. Elu b'nei banav shel Hillel shemalamdim Torah Yisrael barabim. These are the children and grandchildren of Hillel who teach Torah to Klal Yisrael barabim. And what was Hillel? Hillel was the Nasi. So you see that the Reish Galusa is considered the shevet, while the Nasi is considered just a mechokek, and so therefore you would not be considered. And our same idea, he was answering him that the Reish Galusa at the end of the day is above you, and therefore you would not be relevant to being a Nasi, the bringing the carbon of a Nasi. That's what Rav Chia answered Rebbe. Okay, Mishnah. Bezel Mashiach. We've been talking about a Kohen Mashiach. Who is that? Hamashuach b'Shem HaMishcha. Someone who was anointed with the Shem HaMishcha that Moshe Rabbeinu made. Lo Maruba Begadim. Not someone who simply became Kohen Gadol by putting on the 8 garments of a Kohen Gadol. So we know that in the at the very end of the first Beis Hamikdash, by Yehoiah, we know that at the very end of the first Beis Hamikdash that they hid away the Shem HaMishcha, and therefore in the second Beis Hamikdash, everyone who became a Kohen Gadol only was the Kohen Maruba Begadim. So we're saying that all the time we talk about a Mashiach, Kohen Mashiach is talking about someone who actually got the oil anointment and not just someone who was put up in the role and given the clothing. And there's no difference between the one who's anointed or not, except for this issue, that if someone brings whether he's relevant to bringing the par Kohen Mashiach is only if he is Mashuach. And Rashi says also whether he, as a Kohen Gadol, can be the one who delivers the par halam davar shel tzibor. But basically the idea is that's the one major distinction, is this special part of a Kohen Gadol applies only to Mashuach b'Shemen, but the one who's just Maruba Begadim, otherwise they're the same with the exception of this one thing of whether they bring the special carbon of the Kohen Mashiach. And there's no difference between the Kohen who's serving and the Kohen who's passed. What is this talking about? So let's say you had a Kohen Gadol, and he was, something happened. He became Tameh. So they appoint a second guy while the first guy is the first Kohen Gadol is out of commission. When the first Kohen Gadol becomes Tahar again, he resumes his job. So the first Kohen is the Kohen Meshamish, the one who's now serving. The one who had temporarily been Kohen Gadol was considered a Kohen Avar, a Kohen Sha'avar. He was removed from his post. He was temporarily Kohen Gadol, and then he was removed to no longer be Kohen Gadol. So we're going to see that he really has the status of a Kohen Gadol for many purposes. What's the only difference between them is Par Yom Kippurim, Vasir Seifa. The par that's brought on Yom Kippur that the Kohen Gadol brings for him and the Kohanim for purposes of atoning for Tumas Mikdash and Kedasha, that has to be the primary Kohen Gadol has to bring. And the Asir Seifa is the Minchas Chavitin. We learned about the Minchas Chavitin recently because we talked about the fact that that's the flour carbon he brings, and he can't bring the Dale Dalos carbon. But in any event, this is the Chavitin that he brings every day. Those things have to be done by the primary Kohen Gadol. But everything else, Zevaz Shavim, they're equal b'avodas Yom Kippurim with anything other than the par of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, meaning only a Kohen Gadol can do the Ketoris and whatever, but either one of them could do that. Umitzuvim ala basula. Neither of them are allowed to marry anyone other than a basula. Basurim ala amana, and they can't marry a widow. Now you might ask how a widow's not a basula. So obviously we've talked about this. That where you have a woman who had erisin and not nesuin, she's considered an amana, but she's still a basula because she never consummated the marriage. But yet she's not eligible for a kohen gadol. They're both mitzvah not to take an amana. Ve'ena metamim b'krovim. We know a regular kohen can be metamet to his zayin krovim, to his 7 closest relatives, but a kohen gadol cannot. So neither of these, not the primary, not the secondary one, can be metame. Blood parim, they don't grow their hair long over when someone dies. Blood parim, they don't tear their clothes. We know the halacha is that if a kohen gadol, dies, that all the people in the Ari Mikla get out. So therefore, either one of these people die, the people get out of the Ari Mikla. Rabbi Yehuda says, how was the Shemen HaMishcha made? They would boil the roots, because there's we talk about besamim mardrar, besamim rosh mardrar. There's all these things, all these roots you bring together with olive oil to make the Shemen HaMishcha. So what would they do? They would boil these roots in the oil. That's the view of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says, there's not even enough to like rub on the roots in order to get the flavor of the roots. There's not even enough oil for that, much less to boil. If you're going to boil, there's only 12 lugin of oil. If you're going to boil it in all these roots, the roots are going to absorb the oil, and there's going to be no Shemen HaMishcha. So Ella, rather, how would you make the Shemen HaMishcha? Shorness like karmim mayim, that you would soak the roots in water so that they would fill up and become non-absorbent because they're filled with water. Umatzef alav shemen, and then only once they were filled and non-absorbent, you would pour oil on it. The koledes hareach, and they would take. The oil would pick up the a little bit of the flavor of these roots, the kapcho, and then he would immediately wipe it off and put it, and that's how he made the Shemen HaMishcha. So you can't boil the roots in the oil because the oil would all be gone. You have to go through this elaborate procedure of quickly getting the oil on there and then getting it off with a little bit of the flavor. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said back to Rabbi Yossi, he says, was there only one nace done with the Shemen HaMishcha? That there was only 12 lugin of oil to start with. They used the Shemen HaMishcha to anoint the Mishkan and the Kalim in the Mishkan. During the 7 inaugural days of the Mishkan, Aaron and his sons were each anointed every day. The Kulo Kayim Lasid Level. And yet, despite the fact that you started with 12 lugin, you have to prepare them with these roots that are absorbent. You have to use it for the Mishkan. You have to use it for Aaron and his sons. And yet, La'asid Level, there's going to be 12 lugin of oil left. Shenemar, as it says, Shemen Mishchas Kodesh, Yezel Li L'Dorasechem, that this Shemen Mishchas will be for me, the Rebbe Shalom says, L'Dorasechem, for your generation. So that tells you that in the future, there's still going to be 12 lugin of Shemen. So Rabbi Yehuda says, there's lots of nisim that happen with the Shemen HaMishcha, that it stays whole over all those years and all those uses. So therefore, it can also be that you boil it and somehow the roots would not absorb the oil. So that's no proof. A similar brayso, Vayikach Moshe Shemen HaMishcha, Vayimshach et HaMishka me'eskol asher bo, that the pasuk says that Moshe did the Mashicha on the Mishkan and on his Kalim. Rabbi Yehuda says Shemen HaMishcha Shasa Moshe b'Midbar, that the Shemen HaMishcha the Moshe made in Midbar, Kama Nisim Nasabo b'Tchilu v'Atzof. That there lots of nisim were done with it. That there was only 12 lugin of oil to begin with. Ra'a kama yara bala. See how much a pot absorbs. We've been talking about that in Avodah Zarah a lot. The pot absorbs some of the oil. The kama ikarim bolim, and how much these roots absorb. The kama ha'or soref, and how much the fire burns off that it evaporates. Ubol nimshach mishkan v'kelav. And yet we use it to anoint the Mishkan and Kalim, Aaron and Banav Kol Shavusim Me'emuloyim. You use it to anoint Aaron and his sons. And with it you anointed Kohanim Gedolim and Malachim. Now the Gemara, the Bryce is going to take a little detour here and say as follows: Va'afil Kohen Gadol ben Kohen Gadol toim Mashicha, and every Kohen Gadol, even if his son becomes a Kohen Gadol, they still need Mashicha. Vein Moshchen Melech ben Melech, but a son of a king who becomes a king does not need Meshicha. So it's just we reference the fact that the Shemen HaMishcha was used for Kohanim Gedolim and Malachim. So we're saying there's a distinction between a Kohen Gadol and a Melech. That if the son of a Kohen Gadol becomes a Kohen Gadol, he needs Meshicha, and if the son of a Melech becomes a Melech, he does not need Meshicha. V'im Tomer. So you'll ask me, Mipnei Ma Mashku Shlomo. So then why did Shlomo? Shlomo was obviously the son of David HaMelech. So why did he need Meshicha? We see in the psukim that he got that he in fact had Meshicha. We say Mipnei Machlakusa Shel Adonio, because we know that his brother Adonio wanted to become the king. So in order to prove that he was the king, you use the Shemen Mishcha. Or actually, we're going to see that when there's a machlokes that severs the continuation, and you need to start anew by having Shemen HaMishcha. Yes, Yoash Mipnei Asalya, that Yoash was the one that they hid him away. He was the last one of the Malchus Beis David. Asalya had killed off all of Malchus Beis David. So again, because there was a challenge on the kingship and he was brought about to show his legitimacy, he had to be anointed, even though he came from the Davidic line. Yes, Yehoiachaz, when Yehoiachaz, the son of Yashio, became the king, he had to be anointed. That because his brother Yehoiakim was 2 years older than him, so to prove that he's the right king, they did the Mashiach. But generally speaking, Melech ben Melech does not need it. Also, Shemen, and the Brisa continues. So now we're back on the topic of the Shemen HaMishcha. Also, Shemen Kayim Lasad Lavo, and that oil remains forever. Shenever Shemen Mishchas Kodesh Yazel Lilu Dorasechem. That again, that the Shemen Mishcha is still going to be 12 lugin even in the time of Mashiach. And Zeh, when it says Yazel Lilu Dorasechem, this will be for me Lidoras. Zeh B'Gematria Shnei Maser Lugin Have, that Zion is 7, Hey is 5, that's 12. That is still going to be 12 lugin. Okay. I could either record the rest or start early tomorrow. I don't care. Okay, I'll record the rest and we'll send it out. Sorry for not quite finishing.